Hi, Feli. If you can switch on your camera so that we can set. I'm starting the webinar.
Yeah. What is the right
Are we on already?
Hello everyone. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are amazing, and
We'll be starting at the top of the hour, so don't be rattled. Okay?
Yeah, we'll be
Yes, top
starting
of the
quite
hour.
soon. Yeah. You have them?
Checking. Worker guidelines.
Hello guys and welcome to the first ever Mtoto News webinar child series for child participation. Are you excited?
Oh, I am excited. Are you excited?
Very excited. I'm going to be your moderator or host, Omar Ahmed with...
Well, I am Purity Mora and I will be your host or moderator as well. Karibuni sana.
Yes, asante sana. In this webinar we have very interesting people. Everyone is interesting. Of course I'm interesting. Are you, Mora?
Oh, yes I am.
Yes, we have a panel of child who's going to be representing the children by the name Brian King. We also have Miss Felistus Motimedi. We have Dr. Eddie Adai, who will be joining a little bit later. We also have Miss Laura, Dr. Laura Lundy will also be joining us. She's actually from the UK in this meeting. So Mora, at this point, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Of course. So before we start, we have to know what are our guidelines as members of this meeting, right? So first, you introduce yourself in the chat window. So please tell us who you are, where you're listening to us from, what you do, just anything you'd like us to know about yourself, okay? So introduce yourself at the chat box. Number 2, please go to the participants, click on your name and change it by including a dash and your country, okay? So include your name and the country you are from. For example, John dash Uganda, okay? And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. 3, keep microphones and videos off when you are not speaking. That is very important so that we get to hear what the speaker is saying. Then 4, use the interpretation facility if needed. If you need to get anything interpreted, use that. 5, use the raise hand button to request for the floor and wait for the facilitator to invite you to speak. Unmute microphones to speak. Then you can type questions and comments in the chat window throughout the meeting, okay? So if you have any questions, we have the chat box, right, Omar?
Exactly.
And lastly, this meeting is being recorded. Welcome.
Karibu sana. So at this juncture, we want to start. So Miss Mora will be inviting the CEO, founder of Mtoto News. Yes.
Yes, I will read her bio. Her name is Jennifer Kaberi from Kenya. She is the CEO and founder of Mtoto News. Jennifer has over 15 years of experience working with children, a significant amount of being developing child-focused systems. This experience has been gained through working with government, national, regional, and international organizations. Jennifer was seconded by UNICEF to work with the Malawi government to build their capacity in building community systems that care for children, including community-based childcare centers and children corners. That is amazing. Then in Kenya, Jennifer works closely with the Department of Children's Services, the National Council for Children's Services, the Council of Governors, and the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters in enhancing the children's rights to participate through the different committees she sits or has been appointed. And lastly, Jennifer has a passion for children, which has led her in innovating several ways of engaging children and ensuring that their voices are heard. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mora, and thank you, Omar, for such an amazing energy, you know. And thank you, everyone who has joined us for this amazing webinar. And a lot of you have asked why the webinar. And so this is because over the last several years, personally and also as Mtoto News, whenever we engage children at different levels, we get all these sorts of questions. Why are you making our children activists? I've seen one of my friends in the participants. We were in a meeting with her, with a government official, and the government official, don't tell us about child participation. Child participation is a CSO, is a civil society thing to do. Okay, is it? Okay, we are going to be answering these questions. And we've been told in Africa, children need to listen. They don't have to say. Is that right? Okay, we are going to be hearing more about that. Okay, so we want it to be fun, and that's why we have young people doing the moderation. Let me give you a background. Mora was a member of the Kenya Children Assembly a few months ago. okay, and we have given her an opportunity to be able to bring that energy and the training and the capacity that she has learned throughout being a member of the Kenya Children Assembly, and bring that. We are learning so much, as now she's our child participation officer. Omar, you might have seen him in several of our programs. He is still a child. He's taller than me, but he's still a child. So he is he just graduated from high school, but he's also joined us as a child participation facilitator. So he helps us with child participation because they have skills, and we are hoping to learn. Thank you so much, Dr. Laura. Thank you so much, Felicitas. Thank you so much, Honorable Saduku. Thank you so much, Dr. Eddie, for joining us today, and thank you so much, Brian King. If I forget him, he's going to be on my neck. I did not appreciate him. And thank you so much for coming for this session. And we have so much for our participants who have joined. Thank you so much and welcome to this. And if you have any questions, just as Mora said, put them on the chat box and we are going to engage with you. Thank you so much and God bless you.
Asante sana, Jennifer, for that background and for giving each and every single person an opportunity to welcome them to this webinar series. Indio Morama ni aje?
Of course, that was amazing. And of course, we have seen that children need to participate. I participated, I am empowered, and that is why I'm here today.
Exactly.
Yes.
And at this juncture, I want to welcome the person in charge of child participation itself here at Mtoto News. I want to welcome Dan Amdavi Mulati. So I'm going to give a brief bio of Dan. He is currently a child participation manager at Mtoto News. He holds a Bachelor of Law degree and is currently pursuing a master's degree in children and youth ministry. Wow, that's amazing. Daniel is passionate about child protection policy and development and research. He has had the privilege of working in the children protection sector in Kenya for over 6 years and loves journeying with children who are having a tough start at life to give them hope for a better future. Karibu sana, Dan Mulati.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. It's a privilege and honor to have you attend this series on child participation. Child participation as a concept has been gaining momentum across the globe. People, states, civil society organizations, and even individuals have been recognizing the right of children to freely express themselves on matters affecting them. And this is a concept that as an organization, Mtoto News has been practicing for as long as it has been in existence. And as we have been interacting with civil society organizations, with children, with parents, with state officers or officials, we have noticed that there are gray areas or gaps, both in policy and practice. And we felt that we should host this webinar to help ourselves and other actors in the child participation about child protection sector to have a better understanding of the concept of child participation. We all know that children are citizens of today and the future, with rights and capacities to influence a decision on matters affecting them. And this has been affirmed at the global level under the UNCRC Article 12. It bestows upon children the right to freely express themselves. And further, at the global or the continental level, the African level, the regional level, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child under Articles 4 and 7 bestows upon the African children the right to participate or to freely express themselves on issues affecting them. But as much as these treaties at the global level, at the African level, bestows or gives children this right to participate, is it being implemented? I think this is the question that we should be seeking to address or answer this afternoon. That we have a law at the global level, at the regional level. African states have gone ahead to also entrench the same in the constitutions and even specific legal laws, or like in Kenya we have the Children Bill or the Children Act that bestows or domesticates the two global and regional treaties. But is it being implemented by the states? Is it being implemented by the civil society organizations, by even parents at the family level? And do we have an understanding of child participation as a concept? before even we go to practicing. I feel like, well, as Mtoto we felt we need to understand what child participation constitutes. What constitutes meaningful child participation, not just participation, but meaningful participation. And so this webinar is just meant to help us. We have experts on these who are going to unpack child participation to us so that we can have a better understanding. We also don't know everything. As Mtoto News, as much as we practice child participation, we don't know everything. We have invited experts who are going to help unpack child participation as a concept, so that as we go back to our organizations, to our offices, to our spaces of influence, we have a better understanding of what child participation is, and so that we can also guide children to participate in decision making. And so this webinar is meant to help us first and foremost, because we are focusing on Africa, is to create momentum for child participation in Africa. This is a concept that has already been gaining popularity or momentum, but we want to increase the momentum so that we can have civil society organizations facilitating children to engage meaningfully. But also this webinar is meant to help us as practitioners to promote inclusive child participation for all children, because we have groups of children who are missing out on participation today, like children with disabilities, children in marginalized communities or marginalized areas and communities. We want to also promote their inclusion and strengthen even the implementation of child participation in specific African countries and at the continental level. And lastly, we are creating a platform to exchange good practices, tools, and other useful resources. This is a session that we are going to have experts speaking to us, like Professor Laura Lundy. You know, I've been reading about her. When we were when we were establishing a Pan-African child-led organization, we did a background paper, research paper on child-led organizations. And as we were unpacking or researching, we came across different models of child participation. And one of them is the Lundy model of, or Lundy model of child participation. And it's exciting to have her speak to us this afternoon here in Kenya. I don't know, I know it's morning or evening in other parts of the world. And so it's a privilege to have Professor Lundy, to have a member of the African Children's Committee, to have Felistas from the CSO Forum talk to us about child participation, and also to share their tools that they're using or they're promoting with regards to child participation. And so I think I don't want to speak much. We have experts in the room who are going to help us unpack the concept of child participation, and I hope in the end we are going to have something to go back and put in practice. Thank you so much and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Dan. We appreciate your time and for giving us the objectives of our webinar today. So from wherever you are listening to us from, again, karibuni sana, bienvenue, welcome.
Yes.
Now, we are going to the most exciting of parts, where we're getting to learn about child participation, what it is, the global perspective of our UNCRC General Comment number 12, and the new trends in child participation, with Dr. Laura Lundy. I will read her bio. She is from the UK, professor at Queen's University, Belfast, at the Centre for Children's Rights, School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work, SSESW. Professor Laura Lundy is an international expert on children's rights and child and youth participation, and author of the widely used Lundy Model of Child Participation. Professor Lundy is co-director of the Center for Children's Rights and a professor of Education Law and Children's Rights. She is joint editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Children's Rights. Her expertise is in law and human rights, with a particular focus on children's rights to participate in decision-making and education rights. Lastly, the Lundy model has been adopted by numerous national governments and public bodies, as well as international organizations, including the Council of Europe, European Commission, World Health Organization, UNICEF, and World Vision, and that is amazing.
It's the best.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Professor Laura, Lundy, hello and welcome. The floor is yours.
It's not up to adults to decide, well, I think I'll hear you now, or I'll seek your views now, and I won't seek them again. It's an entitlement and not a gift, like other human rights. And so we should always be trying to put it into effect, not just when adults think it is convenient or they choose. Secondly, I've been involved a lot in Ireland in terms of writing their national strategy on child and youth participation. And also they have a new 2021 national participation framework. And we consulted a lot on that. And one of the things that came back was that a lot of people understand participation as taking part, which of course is a normal translation of participation. But what they were missing was that it is not just taking part in an event or a process. And what we're saying is that it is participation with purpose. It's always for a purpose in terms of the human right. And that purpose is that children get to influence the decisions that are made about them. It's always with the view to them having some kind of influence over their own lives. So not just taking part. And then the Lundy Model, one of the things that I have suggested for many, many years, and I think this is the heart of the Lundy Model, is that it is not just voice. We hear so often this idea, it's the voice of the child. We must listen to the voice of the child or the voices of children. And I have been arguing, and this is the Lundy Model, I won't do it now, but I think many of you will be familiar with it, is that it's not just voice. As Dan said at the start, in terms of creating the spaces, we must be giving safe and inclusive spaces for all children, particularly the children who are seldom heard. We must be facilitating children to express their views. We must make sure that we identify who should be listening and making sure that the children's views get to them, the duty bearers, and then there must be influence and they must be acted upon as appropriate. Next thing, and this I think gets to some of the kind of common reactions to Article 12 that were mentioned by Jennifer at the start. It is not abandoning children to their rights. This is sometimes criticised, that you're handing over power to children and they'll get to do things that are harmful to them. That is not what Article 12 is about. It's enabling them to have their views sought, to be taken into account, but ultimately it is not allowing them to do things that would, as Michael Freeman has said, allow them to opt out of something that would undermine their life choices or impair their life interests in an irreparable way. It's not about that. It's not letting children make those kind of fundamental mistakes that would be life-altering. It is also not, and this is one of its biggest criticisms, or from critics, is a way of undermining parents. There is a specific provision in the Convention, Article 5, and it gives parents and guardians and other adults the right and the duty, which is really interesting, to advise and guide the child. And of course, this is a really core and important aspect of the African Charter as well. And what the committee has said is actually that this entitlement, that this role of parents, they have to compensate for the child's lack of knowledge and experience. But the more the child himself or herself knows, has experienced and understands, the more the parent, guardian or others have to transform direction and guidance into reminders and advice. So eventually you could have an exchange on an equal footing, but it is not a way of undermining parents. Parents have a huge role in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. What's new? Okay, this was quite tricky, Jennifer. I mean, obviously, I think it's new, but not so new, is the challenges and opportunities of the digital environment. And I think particularly because of all of us post-COVID, when many children who could get online, and of course many children could not get online, but for those children who were online, we learned a lot about what the opportunities of that. It was an incredible way for them to play, to socialize, to learn. Okay, so there are lots of opportunities for them to share information, exercising their Article 12 right, but there are also challenges of children who can't get online and the challenges and dangers of the digital environment. But we do have the Committee on the Rights of the Child's new general comment, number 25, which looks at that and strongly emphasises the role of child participation, not just at the digital environment as a means of them expressing themselves, but their entitlement to actually shape the digital environment, to be involved in designing platforms, designing safety measures. All of that is crucial and a great opportunity post-COVID for children. Secondly, I think what's new is some kind of more nuanced understanding about the role of child participation in child protection. I think we have known for a long time that you cannot keep children safe unless you hear them. So obviously you need participation for protection. But I think we're increasingly understanding that actually you cannot deliver good child participation if children do not feel safe. They won't speak freely if they don't feel safe. And what we're, I think, seeing lots more work on is ways in which we involve children as a group in designing processes that let children individually speak and be heard safely. Another one, I think, an area it's not new, but they're new, little babies and young children. But I think it's one of our big growth areas. I think previously there'd been a lot of misunderstanding about these very young children's right to be heard and thinking that they were incompetent and couldn't be part of it. But I think what I've seen in work and in research across the world, really an explosion of amazing activity, which works with even our very youngest children, our babies and our toddlers. Not to hear what they have to say because they're not speaking, but to watch, to observe, to speak to parents and design better services that are reflecting the ways in which they are expressing themselves and what they want and what they share with us. And then finally, I want to say, and that is really, I think the last point is really about the definition of participation. So as I said at the start, there is no right to participate in decision-making in either of the conventions. There's a right to have your views sought and taken seriously in Article 12, but Article 12 is one of a number of participation rights, or really a better way of putting it is one of a number of children's civil and political rights. And those rights include the right to form associations, the right to assemble, the right to freedom of information. These are all part of their civil and political rights, like there are ours. And I suppose what we are witnessing in the world, we're witnessing it in climate action, we're witnessing it particularly in Africa with lots of children, are the work of child activists and children human rights defenders. And this is an area where I've done quite a lot of work in the last couple of years with Child Rights Connect and the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And there is a better understanding now of these children and what they're doing. And I was, curious when Jennifer was saying, oh, you'll make them into activists. And I think that is a genuine concern. We know this from the research that we've done across the world, that adults are very worried about that. Okay. And they're right to be worried because child activists can generate a lot of responses that are very abusive to them. So parents are naturally worried about that and other adults. But the response to that is not to stop them. We can't stop them. They're doing it anyway. They're doing it without us. They're not waiting often. Children are not waiting anymore for adults to invite them into spaces. They're creating their own spaces. And so what is the role of adults in that? The role of adults to comply with human rights is to make sure, to take positive steps to make sure that these spaces exist and that these spaces where children can form their own associations, where they can associate, where they can protest, are safe. It's a positive obligation not to stop them, but to do everything possible to enable them to do it safely. And I'm going to finish there with an example of some of my favourite child rights, human rights defenders. This was the African Contingent. We had an advisory group of children who helped guide us on the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child's Day of General Discussion on Children Human Rights Defenders. So we had them from each of the 5 UN regions, and these are the children human rights defenders who were working with us and advising us, and spoke and organised the DGD meeting some of the African members of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And I'm sure lots of you will recognise some people here, including, for instance, Benjamin Mesmer, who's at the back, and opposite him is Anne Skelton from the committee. So that's me. That's my short take on what it is, what it isn't, and some of the things that are new. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll stop sharing.
Dr. Laura Lundy, we have learned a lot from your presentation, from why it's important for child participation, for stakeholders to consider child participation, and not just any type of child participation, but meaningful child participation. So it's about that time where we do not sit. We are not going to sit anymore, because these are not one of those webinars where we're going to just sit all through. No, in fact, it's not healthy to just sit for more than 30 minutes. So what you're going to do is going to stand up. So from wherever you are, find some nice space, okay? Stand up from wherever you are, because we're going to do an icebreaker, okay? Has everyone stood up? Is everyone up? All right. So we're going to do what we call a countdown, okay? So we're going to count down from 5 to 1 with our hands and our waist, okay? Are we ready? Are we ready? Is everyone ready? Great. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our waist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. A one. Thank you so much. You can have your seats from wherever you are. And now we go to the next segment. Omar.
Thank you so much, Mora, for that icebreaker. That was quite interesting. I guess after Honorable Sidiku, we can go back to 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. At this juncture, I want to welcome Honorable Sidiku from Niger to tell us a special rapporteur on the guidelines of child participation. I'm going to read her bio. So Honorable Sidiku is from Niger, currently the special rapporteur on child participation for Guinea, Mali, Senegal, Togo, and Mauritania. She is also a member and former chair of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and of the Child from May 2013 to May 2018. She's also the CEO of the Child Protection, Social Welfare and Humanitarian Action from August 2011 December 2016 of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child as first mandate. She's also the Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of the Promotion of Women on Child Protection. She's also a national coordinator of the G5 Sahel Women's Platform, expert on the local development engineering cooperation projects and social action, and honorary titles now: official testimony of satisfaction awarded by the governor of the region of Niamey, officer of the order of the Knight of the National Order of Niger. So bonjour and welcome, Honorable Sidiku. But first of all, let me welcome Mora for
a brief. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have the French interpretation because Honorable Sidiku is going to speak in French, Français. So we have the French to English interpretation also. Honorable Sidiku, you can turn on your camera. Remember to, if you have any questions, we have the chat box for you.
Et merci de m'avoir invité à ce.
Thank you for having invited me to this webinar on the.
J'espère que vous m'entendez bien.
I hope you're getting me clearly. You're getting me?
D'accord. Merci beaucoup. Donc,
okay, thank you a lot.
sera axé sur
And my presentation, based on the directive by the expert from by the African community on the well-being of the children. And my presentation is based on 4 points. And the first point is it's about introduction first. The right for children participation is seen mostly on article mentioned in the different article, and in the article 9, 31, and talks on the children's right for participation of children, and also mentioned different paragraphs of the act in the African Union, which is measured on the implementation of the children's participation rights. We have different agenda which emphasizes on children's participation. The African Charter, which is based on children's participation, it talks generally on the rights for children to participation, for the non-discrimination of filtration, rights to development and life. These are some of the clauses which protect the implementation of children's rights. It's greatly considered on implementation of these and also in communication of these opinions. The children rights to participate in
pour la mise en œuvre effective de la participation des enfants au niveau des États membres, ainsi que dans les activités du comité, identifier les mécanismes et structures institutionnels nécessaires que les États partis à la Charte africaine des droits et du bien-être de l'enfant doivent mettre en place pour assurer la participation effective et significative des enfants. Orienter le processus systématique de la participation des enfants au niveau national, finalement permettre à la participation des enfants, au comité. Les étapes permettant une participation significative des enfants. Il s'agit de 5 étapes. Les étapes ne sont pas homogènes et dépendent du contexte des enfants, d'un ou de plusieurs enfants. La participation des enfants est un processus qui doit être mis en œuvre méthodiquement en suivant ces étapes ci-dessous. 1. Nous avons au point 1 l'admission, la capacité et la compétence de l'enfant.
The first one is admission, capacity, and the competency of children.
Oblige les États partis à adopter une approche indépendante qui permet à l'enfant de participer librement à toutes les questions le concernant au niveau national.
The committee obliges the member states to adapt an independent approach that allows the child to participate freely in all questions at the national level. The committee calls upon member states to acknowledge in law and in practice the capacity of the child to express his opinions, his skills, and his rights in the decision-making process. It calls upon member states to give the possibility to the child to have his opinions heard. The second step is access to information. The committee calls on member states to give access to sufficient information to children on issues affecting them. The committee calls on member states to adopt laws that make access to children mandatory. Sufficient information needs to be adapted to age and the child concerned. The information should also take into account the level of understanding of the child. The third step is space and time. The committee tasks the states to allow the child to participate in a rhythm that is convenient for him, to the right and the well-being of the child. The space should be free, not confined to four walls, to allow participation of the child, so that the child does not feel pressured or that he's not stressed in that place. Member states should avoid forcing or influencing a child before or during this participation process or decision making. Children should have enough space and time to participate in these judicial procedures and administrative procedures at the national level. The fourth step is audience and attention. The audience is calling upon member states to listen attentively the opinion expressed by the child in question. The fifth step is influence. The states should take into account the opinion of the child seriously, and then following they should put reasonable measures in line with the appropriate law. They should give information to the child, communicating the reasons of the taken action. Now, participation of the children at the committee level. We have the general observation and studies on the continental level. We have member states and the civil societies to identify children and structures led by children to get their opinion in this process of creating a general observation. Member states should make general observation, including versions that are convenient to the children in their official languages, and to make them accessible to children at the national level. The children should be given enough opportunity to think and give their opinion on the study, and also the political implications and the programs at the continental level and the obligations of the member states, as well as program reports, continental reports on the member states. We have the procedure of reporting of the member states, Article 43. The opinion of children need to be taken into account in the process of complementary report in the member states and the civil societies. Member states need to support students or structures led by children at the national level, so that they can submit in an independent way supplementary reports on the state and the implementation of the committee in the area of jurisdiction. We have the follow-up on the final observation and recommendations. The states should put the final observation and recommendations accessible to children with preference in their local languages and in the format. We have the follow-up of final observation and recommendations. The committee collaborates with organizations or forums led by children and other parties to to make available the results of participations of the children during the visit to the children. The procedure of communication, the states need to put in place official procedures adapted to children and put in place national structures to allow the students and other people interested to take part in the violations against the violations of the committee recommendations. Still on the participation of the children in the committee activities, the member states need to collaborate with competent organizations to give sufficient information and accessible on the national level, and the judicial procedures available to report violation incidents of the rights within the states. To give information on the procedure of communication to the committee in the languages and formats accessible to children. The member states need to collaborate with the civil society organizations and other interested bodies to help the children obtain reparation for the violations of their rights in the framework of national judicial systems. Still on the communication procedures, member states and civil society organizations need to take into account the communication procedure of children to give them sufficient information on the content, on the format, and the contents of receiving and the base of the communication of the committee. The research of the committee, member states need to take all the necessary measures to protect the victims from violations of children's rights and afterwards establish a mission against menace and all forms of intimidation are linked to the research. Research of the committee, member states and other parties concerned need to diffuse information adapted to the language of the children, local languages, and the results of the committee. The member states have the responsibility of sharing the research of the committee. Ordinary sessions and extraordinary sessions. The committee is asking member states and institutions and civil society organizations to give a technical support and financial support to children to these ordinary sessions. Member states and all the present parties need to facilitate access to children to research of the committee. The children need to be encouraged to unite before the ordinary sessions to discuss and be in agreement on the questions of the committee. The committee which meets, they need to meet before, and then they'll come and present the report of their work, the committee. That should be the same case for children organization. Still on the ordinary and extraordinary sessions, representation on sex and disability should be underscored among other essential considerations. Member states and other stakeholders are called upon to put available to children reports adapted to children and sessions as well as commentary on the results of their participation. Commemoration of the Day of the African Child and other activities. Member states need to have a commemoration of the Day of African Child and put in place measures that children have been called to this commemoration. Obligations to countries, member states, specific obligations to member states are found in legislation, politic, law, and application. Member states need to revise or change their laws, policies, and administrative procedures that could prevent a child from participating or express freely an opinion on the questions that have been asked. The countries need to put in place a national policy or strategy on participation of children on the rights of children. The national policy on the participation of children need to be outlined, as well as measurable objectives and budgetary allocations for its implementation. Obligations of the member states are also in the administrative and judiciary pursuits. Member states need to protect the children in conflict with the law or children in contact with the judicial system, and give children in contact with in the judicial system health service and psychological care, social care, as well as other pertinent service on the information to access these services. Member states, the children need to have basic service as well as information on how they can access these services. The member states need to check that procedural measures that guarantee participation of children in judicial procedures and protect the right of children to participation. They need to check that their right to participation is not violated because of their age, be it by law or by practice. Obligations of the member states are also in the training measures, capacity enforcement, and raising awareness. Member states need to check that sensibilization programs are adapted to the level of children. They need to put in place national strategies, international and community strategies to make sure that the right of the children is heard. In terms of cooperation and coordination, member states need to put in place norms and mechanisms to collaborate with the stakeholders, to collaborate at the national level with the child, the parents, and if applicable, traditional leaders, community leaders, ONGs, civil societies, and medias. Collaboration and coordination in different contexts. At the sub-regional level, member states need to put in place participation structures at the international level that links the children to community structures, local structures, and national structures. Still on collaboration and coordination in different contexts at the national level. At the community level, the committee is asking member states to collaborate with the members of the community to validate and allow participation of children in the process of reinforcement at the national level. At the family level, member states need to collaborate with the members of the families directly about the child of the education of the child. They need to get the authority of the child that the child's right to participation is not violated. The child's right should be incorporated in the strategy. We have allocation of resources and support in human resources. Member states need to allocate enough resources to support commemorative events, international and locally organized events by the committee. Member states need to finance the creation of clubs of children's rights in schools, as well as in children parliaments and in children representative parliament in all regions, district, geographical location where minority groups and children are allowed. Other measures include measures of protection of the children. We have technology. Member states need to give an environment for training to children so they use the tools to learn, to engage, to learn and respect the right and dignity of the other. The role of the other stakeholders, organizations or forums led by children. It is about encouraging the children to be involved in the process of decision making and in all community process and national process linked to their rights. Give to the community, to member states and civil society organizations in the elaboration of materials adapted to the children, organize regular meetings with children, researches, forums, and discussions on the questions concerning the children, as well as consultations where children can have an effective participation. We have the role of the other stakeholders, role of civil societies, engage the community in community programs, and reinforce capacity of religious leaders, traditional and community leaders in the participation of children. Come up with a consultative group of stakeholders with roles, responsibility, financial contributions, and activities well elaborated for the participation of children so that they can put in place and other stakeholders who need to have for the realization and support of activities in support of the children. We have the private sectors that take the point of view and the opinions of children in terms of their societal responsibilities and all the other decisions that could have an impact on the children out using new innovative technologies like artificial intelligence, analysis tools, data analysis tools to promote security and prevent the violation of rights of children online and offline. For medias, member states need to give ethical advice on how medias can be used to include children at the national and international level. They need to come up with sure platforms where children can express themselves in debates. Is also where children can debate online on different themes. We have National Institution of Human Rights. This needs to promote and protect as well as take watch of the rights of children to participate in the framework of their roles. Watch systematically the level, quality, and participation of children at the local, international, and national level. Create units for children and proper environment to hear their cries. Support the victims of a violation of children's rights with legal support as well as individual and collective support. Give a report to the committee on the participation of children in a member state. I've come to the end of the presentation. and the directive lines on the participation of children, and the African Committee on the Right and the Well-being of Children. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. C'était pour votre présentation du Tchad. Et merci de nous faire savoir que participer en ligne, comme cet événement qui est virtuel. Merci beaucoup, cœur. Et aussi, on est ravis que les règles partent de la soutien juridique et c'est vraiment étonnant.
The next panelist,
On va
he
passer
is from Ghana. And Dr. Adai, we understand you're in a rush, but as you prepare for your presentation and right before I read your bio, I'd like you to respond to this question as part of your presentation. Anu Hamis asks, first, thanks us for the webinar and would be very interested to learn what we mean by children within the various contexts or cultures in Africa and how that has implications for legislations and enacting rights. And by this, she does not mean the chronological age, really. The definition of it in terms of chronological age. So perhaps you can answer that as part of your presentation. So Dr. Eddie Adai is from Ghana, representative of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, to the African Union and United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He has spoken in many forums like the CSO Forum, Children's Rights and Alternative Care Day 2021, among many others concerning children and the youth. Eddie Adai, I googled how we say welcome in Ghanaian. It's Akwaba. I hope I've said that right. I have not butchered your language, but in case I have, please correct me. Therefore, Akwaba.
Merci beaucoup et bon après-midi, j'aime l'énergie.
Total news for putting this together. Coming after Prof. Lundy, whose framework I really appreciate.
De venir de...
Madame Sidibou, I made some assumption. I prepared. Give me a second. To try. There's so much background.
Je voudrais présenter le fond de mon écran.
Okay, maybe let me continue.
Alors, permettez-moi de...
There's a lot of background interference.
Toujours le background de mon écran et pour vous présenter.
Okay, we'll live with it. Okay, so I'm sorry.
Alors, désolé. Est-ce que vous pouvez-vous régler ça? Pas comprendre ça. Moi, j'ai beaucoup de bruit.
Hear myself, I can hear myself.
Je m'entends, alors je me demande qu'est-ce qu'il passe. Allô? Ah, je suppose que ça marche maintenant. Je voudrais faire autre chose avec mon présentation.
Ma présentation.
Let me. Can you hear me? Moderator. We have a moderator. Am I on my own? I'm quite clear. Okay. All right. Thanks. I will try and okay. I want to do two things with my presentation. Given I'm
faire trois choses avec
previous
mon
eminent
présentation.
speakers. The first is to set some foundational issues on child participation.
Première, c'est juste
The second, given that
former la fondation de mon présentation.
there's going to be
la fondation de mon présentation.
I'd like to raise some dilemmas that I hope that over the course of this and subsequent conversations we will drill down on and provide some suggestions for moving forward without attempting to be comprehensive. I would try and be high level in my articulation. In doing so, I'll also try and respond to the question on the meaning of the child. I think the previous conversations have set the premises for child participation, and the fact that it's really embedded within the Convention of the Rights of the Child and African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. And the alignment between the two is amazing in terms of the importance of child participation as a right. And I think Professor Lundy has articulated what it is not fairly clearly. So my first message as part of this foundational issue is that it's actually the right thing to do. It's appropriate to involve children in whatever we do as a right, but also as a responsibility. But not just that it's a box-ticking exercise, and that's what all of us must guard against. It's actually the smart thing to do. And in doing so, we need to understand the instrumentality of child participation. It can make solutions better if we deliberately.
Ça peut faire de bonnes solutions.
But more importantly, as we look ahead,
ce qui est très important, on regarde toujours loin.
It's not.
Il faut faire reconnaître.
We are not good at it, and admitting and accepting that we are not good at it is the starting point of making things better as we move forward. And for me, the general comments of the CRC and the work that the African Committee are doing, and indeed the African, the CSO Forum is doing, including this conversation, is an attempt to help us do a better job of engaging children. So that, for me, that's the first foundational issue, is the right thing to do, the smart thing to do. We are probably not good at it, and we should continue to work on it. The second foundational issue for me, as I reflect on this particular issue, is that we should start with a simple premise that a child is a child. And when the moment we accept that a child is a child and not a small adult, it helps frame the conversations that we are going to be having. We need to understand that children are always growing, and they should be allowed to make mistakes. And in this landscape, they would make mistakes. They are vulnerable people that need to be protected as well as challenged. And I'll say a few words about that on the dilemmas. But more importantly, playing is a part of the learning journey of a child. And therefore, even in this landscape, the intersection between playing and responsibility will come up. A child is not a small adult. A child is a child. And in different contexts, children have got diverse responsibilities. The children are positioned differently in different contexts. But what is clear in an African context is that generally children are appreciated for what they are. And we as parents and duty bearers have a responsibility stretch them as we have allowed them to learn and grow. And it helps us become a bit more patient with child participation. So the second foundational issue is that we are not dealing with an adult, we are dealing with a child. And you need to be sensitive about that. For me, the third foundational issue is that children are not the same. They are different in different contexts. Children from, the official definition and the practical definition is 0 to 18. And I think the African Charter defines it, the CRC defines it. So that's a defined age for the child, but they are not homogeneous. There's the young people, there's the early childhood stage, there is the adolescents. They come in blocks. More importantly, they come in, depending on the context, they get different kinds of exposures. What it means for child participation is that a one-size-fits-all approach will not work. We have, in the context of child participation, to agree on what are the core principles, but also understand that these principles will be implemented in diverse contexts. And I'm hoping that as we engage in this conversation over the next, in subsequent conversation, we'll drill down a bit more into the diversities that exist on our continent and agree core principles, but how do we deal with these core principles in diverse contexts? So let's remember that we are not dealing with a homogeneous group as children. But in spite of that, as we think of participation, we should use that as a basis for allowing the children to grow, have given them dignity, and also leveraging their agency as children so that they grow into adults. And that's what we need to keep in mind. Children are always growing universally, but they are not the same. It's like a conveyor belt. And we must look at that very carefully as we think about child participation. The last foundational issue is that, our society is changing. What we define as child participation when I was a young boy is fairly different from what we are talking about today. Access to internet, globalization, and technology, our society is changing. But there's also diversities within our society. But one of the biggest shifts that is happening to our society is what is happening at the micro-family level. Family structures are changing. In the past, I would, if you allow me to use this word, it was a command household. The father used to command everybody around, and children were expected to comply. That has changed. And it's changing in all societies on our continent, in Africa and globally. The household has become increasingly a negotiation space, a space where children's voice are being heard because of access to technology, access to information. And earlier speakers already spoke about the issue of technology, exposing children to different kinds of information and virtual networks. It's a different society to the society that I grew up in, and I believe Madam Sidiku grew up in. And the issue is that how do we transform the principles of child participation in an ever-changing society? And we are struggling with it. And let me use this opportunity to congratulate the CSO Forum for having this dialogue. My thinking is that this is a dialogue that must continue. This is a dialogue that must continue to enhance the effort that the committee is doing and that the CRC is doing. So as we think through child participation, let us think about these foundational issues. It's a right and the right thing to do. The child is not the same everywhere. A child is not a small adult, it's a growing, the child is always growing, learning, and playing is part of it. So don't get it wrong from our perspective, and nothing is static. So in this context, there are a couple of dilemmas that I'm hoping that we would interrogate over the next couple of conversations. The first
La première chose,
dilemma is how do we deal as parents and as duty bearers with the fears and worries of child participation? The threat of exposing our children with the importance of exposing them into spaces that will allow them to learn, the possibilities and opportunities that child participation brings. So we need to deal with this dilemma. The second is, how do we provide the care that children need, as well as stimulate them to be effective social actors and participants in a changing context? The third is, how do we guarantee the childhood of all children on our continent while enabling them at the same time to grow into responsible citizens? And last dilemma that I think we must interrogate as we engage with this process is, how do we protect our children while giving them the space to learn and grow through participation? I don't think there are easy answers to it, but there are some principles that should guide us as we move forward. And I'm hoping that through the CSO forum and through to the work we are doing with the committee and with other partners, we can come together around some simple principles that are guided by the Lundy Model. So for me, the Lundy Model is a very good point of departure. But as we look into the future, let me offer some thoughts. And the thoughts should start with our role as duty bearers. And to go back to the foundational issues that we as duty bearers must do. And that is to create the enabling conditions in different contexts for our children to survive, thrive, and to develop to achieve their full potential. And that should always be on our mind, even as we talk about child participation. And to recognize that development of a child is not just physical. It includes their physical development, but it includes their social development, their cognitive development, their emotional development, and their linguistic development. So how do we engage in child participation in a way that enables the child to do that? Because that's our primary calling. Giving the children are not the same. And as we frame participation, we must frame participation in a way that helps our children achieve some critical milestones. And these milestones must be taken into account as we engage in child participation. I think post-survival, which starts from pregnancy, it's our hope, UNICEF's position, is that by 5 years, every child is ready for school. So the early childhood development becomes a very important milestone that participation, which is a continuum, must help us achieve. Because it's an instrumental way to do that. And that's the play period. And that's why I say playing is an essential ingredient of children's participation. The second milestone that we have to help our children achieve, and by the way, these milestones are fairly cumulative, is that by age 10, our children are ready to learn. They are able to read to learn. In other words, they must learn to read so that they can read to learn. So participation to enable these our children really be able to read so they can learn. They must be ready to learn. A child who is not ready to learn at age 10 is a child who's not achieving their developmental milestone that brings the 5 pieces that I talked about together. And by age 18, a child should be ready to work and ready for life. So these are the things that should frame our thinking. And for me, as we look into making sure our children achieve these important developmental milestones, we have to focus on 3 P's. The first P is the provision of services and information. The right services and the right information must be available. The second P is the protection of our children from violence, abuse, and exploitation, and understanding that they are always vulnerable to that. And the last P, which is the subject of this conversation, is enabling their participation. The first 2 P's are without controversy, even though there's a lot of work to be done. There's consensus, or generally consensus, on what needs to be done. It's the participation bit that remains fairly challenging and fairly diverse in different contexts, and because children are also not homogeneous. So let me try and offer some thoughts for moving forward. And I offer these thoughts as principles that I hope that through these conversations we can help consolidate. The first overarching principle that I'd like to offer, building on the earlier conversation, is that participation must be age appropriate and context specific and context relevant. We should hold that thought and make sure that as we engage and evolve our systems for participation, we don't treat the child as a homogeneous group. They are different. The second is we must provide the opportunity for children to learn and grow through participation. We must allow our children to make mistakes, but they must learn and grow. So whatever effort we put in, I would suggest that there must be space for an after-action review on the enabling spaces that we are creating for our children. The third principle that I hope we can work on as we evolve our approaches to participation, that is that it must have inbuilt safeguards. Children must leave and come in depending on the level of comfort. It makes it important for us to be testing their levels of comfort throughout the processes. A one-size-fits-all approach cannot work for all children and all contexts. And lastly, we must use what I call the combination of 4 C's. And as we design participation program, let's be guided by these 4 C's. The first is what I call capacity building, grooming, nurturing. People like Professor Lundy, people like Madam Sidiku should be available to nurture these children and young people so they grow. We must build that in deliberately. The second is what you've heard earlier on. The second C is about being deliberate about consulting children. We should ask ourselves each time, have we reached out deliberately to children? Let me congratulate Total News for making sure that children are being heard. And for the African Committee for creating spaces for children to speak in various fora. But that's not enough. There must be deliberate consultation of children. We must reach out to them. We must be part of our body politic and the way we do business. The second C, which I think we need to work a bit more on, is about connecting children, connecting them and creating spaces for the children to come together to speak among themselves, to learn and play, but more importantly, to have child-led activities. And we are just there as observers. The children need their space. We need to create that space for them. Whether they are connected to larger conversations or not, the children should have their space. So connecting the children within countries, within communities, but also within the continent is something we must invest in. And the last C, which I see very little about, and we in UNICEF are trying to do a bit more through your report and through some of the things that we are doing, is be deliberate about working with children to do things. The only way our children learn is through service. We must work with them to do things and instill a culture of service in them. So it's about capacity building, consultation of children, connecting children to facilitate child-led activities, and collaborating with children to do things in spaces that allow them to learn. And as we do all these things, we should remember that a child is a child, not a small adult. So they make mistakes. So ultimately, in child participation is once again about the 3 Ps, providing a safe and enabling space for children to participate, protecting these children in these spaces, and actually enabling these children to participate. The 3 Ps once again come up. Finally, I think that particularly for the older children, in our engagement, we must encourage these older children to engage in the space. They should seize these spaces. So older children who are on this call, seize the spaces when you are called, when you are giving them, and make it worthwhile. Also, in seizing the space, in these spaces, make sure you try and find a way of hearing the voices of other children. And sometimes what I have noticed is that because we are not helping with connecting children, the older children come in and represent their views. We need to represent the views of children. So let's be deliberate about bringing in the views of other children. And where the spaces do not exist, advocate for it. Today you have the tools to do so. Because as we grow older, we have memory lapses and sometimes we don't always do the right thing. Remind us that you are there and you are here to make a meaningful contribution to the development of your communities, of your countries, and of our continent. So let me thank you so much for the opportunity to bring a different perspective to this conversation, and I hope that it has complemented the excellent presentations from Madam Sidiku and Prof. Lundy, but I hope I've presented a perspective that allows us to begin to look at how we move forward on this very, very long journey of learning and doing, but making sure that in this space, children are safe, they learn and they grow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eddie Adai, for giving us the legal basis of the child participation at the global and the regional level, and also for mentioning about the 3 Cs, which are capacity build, consult, commit, and I'm going to add one more. I'm going to add consistency, that this process should be consistent. Child participation should not be something that should just be adopted and then not talked about, and children are taken back to the ages which we want them to move on from. And also, you've mentioned something about children being homogeneous. Basically, there are different children from different places. We have children from Asia, children from Africa, who have different perspectives on child participation. Actually, here in Kenya, I love the way that we have made child participation to look like we need to be engaged in media, we need to be engaged in trainings, we need to be engaged in policy making, we need to be engaged in making decisions about children in parliaments. This actually links to the next speaker, who is actually a child from who is also a representative of the Pan-African Child-Led Organization. That's why I'm saying that I love the way we have taken the perspective. Before I introduce Brian King, I'd love to remind you that you can ask any questions that you have on the chat box, and we will be able to answer you. If you want to ask any question for any of the speakers who have spoken before, Dr. Eddie Adai, or maybe even Dr. Eddie Adai himself, you can ask your questions in the chat box. And also remember that we are recording this, so please let's maintain time and let's look amazing. Okay, so our next speaker is actually a child representative. He is Brian King, 17 years old, from Kenya, a member of the Pan-African Child-Led Organization PACLO, and the current representative of the East African children in the organization. He's also a trained child journalist at Mtoto News International, and he believes that in coming together, children can fight for their rights. Wow, this is amazing. We need to get this from a child perspective. I would have given my views, but today let me give Brian King his chance to introduce this. Anyway, so Brian King, how are you?
Hi Omar, been fine, excited to join the webinar and just give the perspective of a child on child participation.
We actually have to make children feel comfortable in webinars like this, where there are many speeches, so do you need juice, maybe?
Well, I could use some, any can do, but it's okay. We have to first of all deal with what is important, and I'm excited to do that, just to dwell into the perspective of a child and child participation. What does it mean to me as a child? What does it entail? You see, not just to me, but for all the children I'm representing today.
So basically, we're actually getting child participation on a child's perspective. Sindio Brian, thank you so much. Tuende kazi.
Okay, awesome. So basically, you've heard it, my friends. My name is Brian King, 17-year-old child, and a very, very outspoken child participation advocate. So first of all, I'd like to, child participation is one of the core principles in the Convention of the Rights of the Children. But now, what does it mean to children, okay? As in, what does it mean to me as a child? For me, it means inclusion. It means being included in those conversations, in those legal frameworks. It means consideration, and it also means recognition to me as a child, not just as a tiny human being. You see? So but now for me, it starts from home, from the family level, when we're making decisions like, when are we going to move from this place to the other? When am I going to shift schools to this and that? To the community level, here we come to the schools, where the schools let us to actually allow us to choose democratically our leaders and our representatives to the administration. We have our prefects, our governors and our presidents, even the DH captain and all. And then to the national level, where the government is actually very active, and it allows kids to actually have a children's assembly or a children's parliament, and not just have it. The government is ready to listen to this government. It's ready to actually involve them in decision making and get their views, because this will basically be representatives from all over the country. Omar, as in, now for me personally as a child, why is child participation important? According to what I've learned, now this is what I've learned during the many trainings, child participation is important because it allows the voices of children to be heard, right? But now, according to me, a 17-year-old child participation is important because it makes me feel considered. It makes me feel heard. It makes sure that my voice is actually heard and included in those decisions making, not just in my family, to my community, to even the national level. It makes sure my well-being is always first-hand because, well, I am involved, and I'm going to make sure that whenever you're making decisions, I'm involved, and, well, what I want and what I actually need is going to be there, and it's going to be heard. It makes sure that whenever I am wronged, I'm able to speak out because I am empowered by the community, by the society, and even by my country. It makes sure that I grow up all-rounded because I am also able to speak out, not just for me, but even for my friends out there, my friends and peers as well. It also makes me very aware of what goes on around my country, my community, my society, because they're engaging me in policy making, in decision making, even the most basic decisions. As long as they're going to affect me, I am involved, and that makes me feel proud, Omar. As long as you're aware of what goes on, you're able to be empowered, you're able to know this is wrong. And in this case, this is where even when a child is abused, they don't just keep quiet. they're able to stand up, they're able to report it, because they know there are people out there who listen to me, and I know that I was involved in making the policies that are supposed to guide me. I know how I know the correct policies, the correct procedures basically, on how I am supposed to go and report a case of abuse, how I am supposed to go and actually say this is the guy who abused me and this is how he abused me. I'm able to actually know how I was abused. There's some kids out there who are not aware how they are abused. They don't know all their rights. They don't know what is right and what is actually wrong. Now, after all, we've had it. We have had a lot of child participation talks over the past few years, and I'm happy that it's actually becoming something that we can actually be able to talk about. The adults, the government, the leaders, the representatives. You've had Dr. Eddie here. Important people are actually talking about involving children in decision making, right? But now today I want to talk not just to the people in the webinar, but also to all the children. What is our role in child participation actually? Once we are given this forum, once we are enabled, once we are empowered to actually participate in decision making, what is our role? First of all, I'm going to just start with, as a child, what role do I have to play in child participation? Well, other than actually participating after you're involved, you see, like in meetings and all, other than just participating, you don't just go there and relax and smile and be part of the meeting. Other than just that, what else can we do? What else do we need to do? As children, our role is actually as important as adults, maybe even more important, you see. Maybe it's a bigger role. It actually is, because now it's actually our turn to make the difference. It's actually our turn to turn the tables, ensure that we can be able to speak out against the policies that we feel are affecting us directly. We can be able to say, don't make this policy because it might have been good for you 30 years ago, but it's not for me right now, currently. And I think another something is, once we are engaged and once we have participated in all these forums, we also need to do a follow-up. We need to follow up on these legal entities after they have taken all these views of ours. We need to make sure they're actually implemented. They don't just stay in books and in recordings, videotapes and all. We need to follow up, and we need to make sure that all these are actually entitled. We need to make the adults know that we're actually more than tiny humans who like to play and watch cartoons. We can actually get engaged and participate in important things that do concern us. Now, we've learned how we're supposed to actually engage ourselves. Now, how do we actually do it? What do we need to do, and how do we need to do it? Well, as I said earlier, we as children do have a very strong role, maybe even bigger than the adults when it comes to child participation. And I think, first of all, there is a concept that I'd like to introduce, something that hinders child participation to its fullest, because it really likes to hinder our way, just block it and cut it off or divert it. You see, it's called adultism. This is where adults have a direct say into what kids want, okay, where children are actually manipulated to think that they are participating, when actually what they're doing is they're just displaying or just showing or presenting the adults' views as children, you see. So what they're doing, they're being used as transmitters. Instead of them giving their own views, they are coached and tutored into what they're supposed to say, into how they're supposed to say. That is not the child way, Omar. Adultism is a concept that has long hindered our journey in child participation, basically. It is very wrong, because when you're teaching your child what to say, you're not actually empowering that child. You're giving a reflection of yourself. You're creating a mirror to what you want, not the child. So according to me, we need to have, first of all, get away from adultism. We need to let children be children. You need to let me as a child say what I want, how I want it, and how I actually feel about it. Don't tell me, no, that is impossible, that is too hard, that is over-ambitious. You need to let me be over-ambitious, because after all, I am the man of the future. The future is ours, right? So yeah, I think we need to first of all get over adultism, and we need to show interest in important matters like climate change and leadership. Most kids out there are not given the chance to express themselves and show their interest. Most kids out there are not made aware of important issues like climate change, you see. Most kids are excluded from the table when you're talking about important matters, and that's what I mean. We need to actually engage these children, just show them that this is a matter that is going to concern you in the next 10 years, right? You're going to have your ID and you're going to maybe have kids, or 20 years, you're going to have kids and you're going to have a family, and it's going to affect you. Now, what do you need to do? We as children need to actually start making a difference. Is it just by collecting a plastic bottle? Is it by not watching TV too much to avoid energy wastage? Is it by turning off that light bulb? It's simple, but we as children need to start engaging ourselves in important matters. When we get webinars and forums like this, we need to show the adults that we're ready to actually stand up for ourselves. And you as adults need to actually start listening to us. It might not be what you want to hear, but it is from our child perspective. We as children need to show that this is what we want, and you as adults, we should actually consider that maybe this is not so bad for the children. I mean, if they all want it and if they feel it's important, maybe just a bit of consideration is good. We need to make sure that adults remember that we are not kids forever. But most importantly, as long as, even though we are actually engaging ourselves and playing this important role, Omar, we should never forget to enjoy our childhood. After all, we are children, right? Yeah. And something else, even though child participation is important, always remember that a right to play is also part of the children's right, right? Yeah. Engage your child, but only in a way that it does not affect them, their psychological being and their physical well-being as well. After all, we are the ones who are supposed to make the world a better place, right? Now, children and me, a child. When we're talking about children participation, most of us go into the bigger picture, the thousands and millions of kids out there in Africa. But what about you as a child? What are you doing to actually make child participation something that is important and a critical matter on Africa? When you're given this chance as a child, what do you need to do? And how are you doing it? Are you just going and reading a book and not showing passion? You as a child, if you want to be listened to, first of all, you have to stand up and show that you want to be listened to. Yeah. You have to be ready to fight for your rights. You have to be ready to show that you know this is wrong and you're very ready to not do the wrong. You have to stay away from things like drugs and crime and all that. You have to not accept to be misused by anyone at all. And as children and in child participation, we tend to have a very gross line between disobedience and unruliness, and actually being engaged and knowing who you are. We should always remember to respect and love our parents. They should engage us and they should treat us like we're not just kids. We are more than just kids, but always remember that obedience and care for your family is important as well. We as children have a responsibility to learn our rights. Like now you, Omar, you are a child, right? And you know all your rights. Yeah. I think it is your responsibility as a child to share your knowledge, to share your experiences with the other children in your community, in your play area, your peers in school. It is our responsibility to join clubs like the UN clubs, right? Yeah. The journalism club, the law rights club. It is important to show advocacy, show that we as children are ready to actually stand up and defend our rights. It is important to show that we know our rights. The adults are there to support us. Now it is our turn to actually stand up and show that we are able to defend our rights. We should understand that we can fight for our rights by simply teaching our friends their rights and being ready to report any rights violation to adults and legal entities. As a child, do you know the local helpline or the landlines that are important for you? Do you know how to report their authorities? Do you know where your local police station is? Do you know when your rights are actually being violated? It is very important to learn such, because I've had a lot of adults say it is important, very important for children to report when they're being violated, but it has come to my realization that most kids do not even know when they're being violated. The children's rights are very accessible via online websites like the Mtoto News websites and the Paklo websites. It is very important to know your rights as a child. It is very important to make sure that your rights are always violated, but it is also just as important to know the responsibilities and the limitations to those rights. Your rights should never infringe the rights of any other person. But all in all, we should never forget that we are children and we have a right to have fun. That is true. I keep repeating that. We should always have fun in whatever we are doing, in however we are doing it. And you as adults should always make sure that whenever you are making a decision, be it, as I said before, in the family level, involve your children, in the community level, the society. Even like here in Kenya, we have an initiative called the Nyumba Kumi initiative. It is so unfortunate that children are not really engaged in that. We have the elders in our society who are very engaged in that, and it is very helpful and insightful. But you see, engage children in forums like that, we see a lot, we hear a lot, but most of the times we tend to be ignored or just pass by. It is important to always know that we as children have the capacity and are very ready to start defending our rights. We are very happy to do it if only we are facilitated. Children rights awareness has been very low in Africa, especially here in Kenya. I believe organizations like Mtoto News are actually trying to pass that on and to show that I am here to not only represent children, I am here to also represent the Pan-African children-led organization. As you had seen earlier, it is an organization like Mtoto News and Save the Children and the CSO Forum. We basically want to fight for children's rights, but us kids are the one leading, are the ones on top of the organizations. We're the one actually leading the organization. We are here to fight for our rights using us children. We go by the phrase, fighting for our rights without us is not fighting for us. And so using organizations like PACLO and Mtoto News and Save the Children and all the other children organizations out there, we can change the future for African children. We can help those children by involving us. The right to participation is actually, I believe it is, not that I'm undermining the other rights, but I believe it is one of the most important rights, because as long as a child is engaged, then from there on we can start working from all the other rights. We can start working towards all the other rights. Empowerment is very important. And how do you empower a child? First of all, you engage them. One of the previous speakers said that you cannot keep a child safe without actually engaging them. And the child cannot be able to freely speak on their own behalf unless they feel safe, right? This is the thing. Without actually engaging these children, they can never feel safe. They can never feel like, if I say this, it will actually get to someone and it can help someone. There'll always be that thought at the back where, if I say this and someone out there hears it, maybe my mom and dad, maybe they'll be offended and they'll have to be punished. Punishment is not so bad. I cannot say it's bad, Omar, but it has to be limited, and we have to understand that having your own personal view as a child is not a terrible thing. Okay, it can be guided into the right thoughts, because sometimes we do need guidance as children, but we should always make sure that the views of a child are respected and are heard and are actually considered in decision making. Thank you so much, Omar. That will be all for me.
Wow, thank you so much, Brian. That's a really good presentation you gave us there. Actually, you've narrowed it down, everything about child participation from the community level. Asante sana. But we have some questions that we have gotten from you people. I'm going to start with the question by Mariana. Mariana is saying, hello Brian, how does the future look for you when you attain adult legal age, and what plans are there in place to keep nurturing child rights representative as adult ambassadors?
Okay, I believe the future is looking very bright, Omar, because of organizations that I've seen a lot of organizations that are actually fighting for kids, and most of them are adult based. Though they do involve children, they are adult based. So I can say the future is looking very bright for me as I turn into an adult Mariana. But right now as a child, it's not looking so good. We are trying, but it's not looking so good. As an adult, it's going to look better because I can join organizations like the CSO Forum, and I can fight for those children. I can be like those adult ambassadors. We have a lot of those, and we love them for the work they're doing, right? But now as a child, organizations like PACLO are just trying to break through and actually engage these children a lot. The right to participation has been greatly undermined. May I say that, Omar? Yeah. Because we tend to hold meetings and webinars and forums and talk about how we should engage these children without actually engaging them, right? Like the Day of the African Child is fast approaching, right? In the previous years, there were a lot of them, and I remember there was one I watched where it was all adults, and they were so busy saying how we should empower the child, and the child was not actually there. So that's what I mean. For the adults, it's looking very great, and I can say let's keep on the good work, let's keep building up. But right now we also need to engage organizations like PACLO and actually just help them out so that children can actually feel engaged. Not just PACLO, we have right here in Kenya, we have the Kenya Children's Assembly, right? It's a parliament for children. We need to help entities like those. We need to help those kids sit, let them speak and let them be heard, right? Yeah. Thank you
so much, Brian, for that answer. You have actually said it quite well. Tim Ekesa, he's asking, he's saying, hi Brian, how has your journey been? How were you elected to represent the region? We can learn from you how the region has implemented child participation ideas.
the journey has been interesting and exciting, I'd say that, just to get to know my rights and how to feel. I'd like to say that before I joined high school, I was not so aware, and it is happening to our young brothers and sisters. We tend to only know our rights when we are about the age of 16, 17, 18, right? That's when we are just about to bridge into adulthood. So I think it has been exciting to know this. I was one of those people who only got to know about that when I was 16, 17, 18. And I am trying to teach that to all the younger children from 6, 7 years. As long as you can understand me, please know your rights. How was I elected into the forum? Well, Mtoto News facilitated me to join a forum just like this one, and we were able to innovate a company. No, wait, an organization just for children to actually help us children meet together, come up with solutions to the problems we feel that we have, not that the adults have done the research and all the problems that on our homes, to our society, to our counties, to our countries. What we feel at some of the problems we feel we have and how we can actually solve them. We just decided to come up with this organization with facilitation, and we were able to come up with this organization. We named it the Pan-African Child-Led Organization because it is a regional organization. It is not just only for Kenyan kids. We're able to engage with children from all over Africa, and I was elected. Well, there were elections, and I was elected to actually represent these kids. So that is how I actually became the Eastern African representative. We elected representatives from East Africa, Central Africa, and South Africa. Yes, we're still working our way to North Africa, but soon we're going to be electing them. So that is how I made it to the election. That is how I made it to be representative of the Eastern African representative of PACLO. But yes, learning from me, I am honored, but I cannot say I have a lot to teach you. All I can say is we need to learn our rights. We need to be able to stand up to ourselves, and we need to be able to actually say yes when it is time for us to say yes. We need to say no when it is time for us to say no. And most of all, I keep saying we need to have fun while doing that. Yes, Omar.
Thank you so much, Brian. Now, at this juncture, I think we want to welcome the next speaker. But thank you so much, Brian, for what you have said. As a child, I feel like I'm actually represented by you. I feel like everything that you have said is actually going to help children who are going to come before us, and children who are actually young and actually growing. I know you've said that children from 6, 7, as long as you can speak, as long as you can hear what Brian is saying, as long as you can hear what I am saying, as long as you can be able to be facilitated to come to organizations like Mtoto News, learn your rights, get to know advocacy, get to speak about your rights, get to say anything that you feel like is not going according to the children, because I am sure that in Kenya we almost half the population of the country, I think even half of the population in the country is children, and in the world we have a really huge representation of children. So this is actually something we should not keep quiet about, and we should actually speak about. So at this juncture, I will welcome Mora to continue with the program.
Thank you very much, Omar. That was quite an insightful conversation. Thanks so much, Brian. And also he talked about adultism, which is quite a hindrance. Yes. So we focus more on meaningful child participation and not tokenism. Thank you very much. Now, our next speaker is Felicitas Motimedi, and she is from Botswana, current Regional Director of the Child Rights Network for Southern Africa, CRNSA, professional in social policy, analysis and administration. She is highly skilled in child advocacy, community development, monitoring and evaluation, reporting and analysis, research and community organizing, among others. And let's remember that if you have any questions, whether it's for Ms. Felicitas Motimedi, for Laura Lundy, who might be checking our webinar, do ask in the chat box, okay? So Felicitas Motimedi, Professor Felicitas Motimedi. All right, sorry, I'm being corrected again. If you have any questions for Professor Laura Lundy, please do ask in the chat box. In the meantime, Dr. Felicitas Motimedi. Oh, Professor Lundy, you're welcome to speak as we go on. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Laura Lundy, you're welcome to speak. I think we had, I think Ms. Felicitas Multimedia will wait for a bit. So, Professor Laura Lundy, the floor is yours.
Okay, I wasn't expecting the floor. I'm very sorry. I've been listening with really great interest, and I don't want to take up more time. I'm teaching in 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to go and give a lecture. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic to listen to everyone and to learn more about some of the challenges in Africa. Lots of them are the same, but there are some that are distinctive, and it was particularly interesting to hear Brian speak from his perspective about what's important, and for me, his definition of inclusion and consideration and recognition was a very powerful way of putting child participation. So I'm not going to take up time. If there are any questions, I'm happy to respond to them in the chat while I've still got a few minutes. Thank you again for the invitation.
Felicitas Multimedia is not here with us on live, but she recorded we have a pre-recorded video of her whatever she would like to tell us on CSO's perspective on child participation. So we're just going to play the pre-recorded video.
My name is Felicitas Multimedia, and I am from the CSO Forum, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, Civil Society Forum. And this is a platform that all civil society organizations in all 5 African regions come together to, we convene and we connect, particularly on issues of children. And this is the platform that then gives us an opportunity to share information, that gives us an opportunity to share good practices, but also gives us an opportunity to prioritize those issues that we feel should be prioritized insofar as the African child is concerned. And child participation is one of them in terms of ensuring that we could, as civil society organizations, have a standardized way that we facilitate for duty bearers, especially for governments, to be able to hold to be able to uphold their obligations insofar as child participation is concerned. Now, different speakers really have expanded on what child participation is, from the global to the continental level, and my role really is to speak to what we as civil society organizations deem child participation to be. You would firstly just to appreciate that as civil society organizations, we are partners in development. And that simply means that we hold government and businesses to account, and we help in making sure that in all the countries, in all the different spaces and structures that we work in, that no one is left behind by development, and that includes children. Now, when we're talking about no one being left behind by development, we're simply saying that everyone in their country, in their jurisdiction, they need to play a role in terms of what it is that they contribute to, but more than that, that they need to have services that facilitates for them to be able to contribute to the development of the country. Now, when you come to issues of child participation, you would also know that as civil society organizations, particularly the CSO Forum, that we were the first to start child participation at the level of the committee. In 2019 November, we invited children.
Thank you Dr. Felicitas Motimedi for your remarks on the role of, the perspective rather, of CSOs on child participation, because we all need to come together to ensure that children participate. Thank you very, very much. Let us remember that this is just one of the 4 webinar series that we're going to have, so we're going to have more and more from us here at Mtoto News. Now, again, also, you can ask your questions in the chat box. We will get to answer them. The experts will get to answer them. Also, for the coming webinar series, we'll get to answer them. Right about now, we will have Miss Jennifer Kaberi give us the next steps and her remarks. Karibu sana, bienvenue, welcome.
Thank you so much. You know, I was just listening, and it's so much learning. You know, there's some of you who have asked for certificates. I think we need to consider to give you guys certificates, because this, I think, is child participation 101, you know, and the speakers have just gone into what is child participation, what is it and what it is not, okay, and what are the trends, okay, from Professor Laura, and then going to Honorable Sidiko, giving us the African context, you know, and what does the guidelines say about child participation? What does state parties do? State parties need to do? What do businesses need to do? What do CSOs need to do to ensure child participation is happening? Even what do children need to do? And we heard from a child, you know, who was very eloquent and very passionate about child participation, and saying for them child participation they need to be recognized, not just be put there. So thank you so much, Dr. Dai. You know, the 3 C's, okay, of commitment, of capacity building, and consulting of children, you know, that is very, very important. And Felicitas just ending us and telling us, as CSOs, we have a role of ensuring that children are facilitating. We have another series coming up next week, but this is different. With support from World Vision, if you're in Kenya, and we have tried to, by extension, the rest of Africa, we are going to get to do a deep dive in the African ACSWC child participation guidelines. Okay, so we are going to have a hybrid workshop, okay, next week. We are going to be sharing the link for you to register. You have to register for you to be able to attend the physical meeting. But for those ones who are going to be joining us virtually, you're going to use the same link that you used to register for this particular webinar. So we are going to start next week on 24th from 9 a.m. East African time to 1 p.m. We're going to have a workshop just to have a dive in on what do the guidelines say. What can we be able, how can we support the committee, how can we support the state parties to implement the child participation guidelines. And then in the afternoon, we have Dr. Elvis Fokala coming in, telling us a little bit more about the balance model and the African child participation. Is it an African concept? Is it a foreign concept? And then we have Dr. Admak Moyo from ACPF also coming in and telling us. And then we have Sam Norga, child participation among young women and girls. What does that look like? Okay, and then also we are going to have a child. Okay, just diving into child participation. I want to say a huge thank you to all our panelists and our amazing participants who have joined us, and have been actively participating. Oops, I've just been who have been actively participating in this whole webinar. Thank you. I've seen your questions. Thank you so much, and do let us know what other topics we need to delve into. Okay, so we're going to have, this is our first one. We are planning to have another webinar series in September, more practical, just doing practical how to do child participation. We have seen questions talking about safeguarding for those ones who registered. We are going to do that in September. For this one, it's just more of child participation 101 for us to be able to understand. For those of us who don't understand what is child participation, for us to be able to understand better. So with that, I want to say thank you. And I want to invite Omar and Mora to come and finish up. Thank you.
Hey, Omar, come over. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna give you a high five. Come on, give me a high five. Thank you so much for joining us. We high five you from wherever you are listening to us from. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. We send you good vibes and energies from wherever you're listening to us from. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. However you say thank you in your language. Shukrani sana. Asante. 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 And bye-bye.
And goodbye.
Goodbye.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.